Hey, thanks so much, Dennis, for joining me this morning. Or it's not this morning for you. I guess it's what, 6 p.m. or so?
Correct.
All right. Well, I write questions because I'm kind of bad on the spot here. So I'm just going to start out with that.
Yeah.
Uh, so, hi, Dennis. Thank you for
Hello.
chat with me today. I'm not sure if you need an introduction. You're likely the first person to appear on this conversation series who will be recognized by everyone watching. But let me just say this out loud. You are the author of many books, including two of my favorite novels of all time, The Sluts and God Jr. And while I'd love to go on and on about how your work has influenced me as a writer and how great you are or whatever, I do want to speak to two things that have made quite an impact on me. First, your continued support and recognition of younger writers and artists. Second, your energy or vitality. I remember meeting up with you and your filmmaking partner, Zac, in Los Angeles. We were walking down the street, headed towards some restaurant where we'd eat lunch later, and you started talking to me about your film Room Temperature, which at that point had yet to enter production. And I don't even remember what you said, but you seemed so excited about it, like a little kid talking about his new toy. And that was quite lovely for me to witness. I think it's very easy as a writer or artist or whatever to get bogged down in the heaviness of our own work and the pessimism of the world around us. So it's nice to see someone who's been doing this a bit longer than me, who I look up to, maintain some excitement around this whole process. Beyond that, I just think you deserve some celebration in regards to your role in the literary community. So, on behalf of myself and many of the people watching this, I just want to say thank you.
Uh, well, thank you very much for those very kind words.
Absolutely. Okay, so moving on, because that's not really a question.
You're pretty energetic too, you know.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I do
Yeah,
my best.
yeah.
All right, so I originally wanted to interview you several months ago, but the delayed timeline has worked out nicely as we're now chatting shortly after the release of your new collection, Flunker, which you published with amphetamine sulfate. I find this kind of funny because I left amphetamine sulfate with Philip's blessing, I might add. And who knows, I may publish with them again at some point. But the reasons for my going elsewhere are pretty simple. I just wanted the opportunity to reach a wider audience and to be paid more than $0 when someone purchased one of my books. Not to say your work doesn't fit with amphetamine sulfate. I think you and I agree that they're one of the most exciting small presses operating right now. Philip Best's curation is incredible, and I've met some of my favorite contemporary writers via my affiliation with the press. But you're Dennis Cooper. You've published with Grove. Your last book came out on Soho Press. Why go with such a small outfit like amphetamine sulfate?
Um, well, the book is like I've said this before, but I feel like it's kind of like an EP. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah,
and with some B-sides and stuff on it too. So I don't know, like we had a little period where cause we've been working on the film for like ever, and there wasn't any work, so I'm really like a busybody, and it's really hard for me not to be working on something. So I suddenly thought, oh, maybe there's some stuff I have. So I went back and looked at all these kind of unfinished things and thought, oh, there's like six that I think I can finish. And then when I was working on them, it just seemed like, oh, this one seems like it'd be really like kind of an amphetamine sulfate book, maybe. Because there's like some fairly transgressive stuff in it, and
right.
I don't know. I thought Philip might like it, so I mean, from when I was working on it, I thought I want to give this to amphetamine sulfate. And yeah, that was it really. And then luckily he said yes, but I don't know, it just felt right, and it is like it's a short book, and I mean the type is very huge, so it really
Right.
makes so it can actually have a spine because it wouldn't if it was done in normal typeface.
They
And
stripped the numbers at the top of the page, take up a quarter of it.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
So really, it's just that I really like amphetamine sulfate, and obviously very much, and Philip. Seems like just a
Yeah.
So I yeah, just thought this is like seems like a good book for them, and So, and it was new. It's for me, it's novel not to do a contract or get any money. It's like, wow, this is interesting. Yeah.
No, I mean, and I agree. And then at certain stages, I mean, I've had no traction prior to, I guess, my last two releases. So it was like he deals in the sort of approving your ideas for the world or something. I just thought it was a little bit funny. I was like, oh fuck, Dennis Cooper is now putting out something on amp sulfate, which is great. Like, and I'm
Right.
not trying to knock this. I just thought that was kind of interesting. Um, well, I mean, that's a pretty simple answer. Do you have any relationship to Philip prior to all this? Like, were you into White House or any of that shit?
Yeah, yeah, I liked White House, and I'm friends with Peter Soto, so
Right.
I never met Philip, and I like consumer electronics, and yeah, just mostly through that. My Giselle Vienne, who I do the theater pieces with,
Yeah.
she's known him a long time to some degree, and Stephen O'Malley from Sun, who was a collaborator,
Oh, right.
knew him too. So I've heard a lot about him, and I like the stuff of his that I. There was a book from, um, what's that? Infinity,
Infinity
whatever.
Land?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
he had that book. I like that book. So, but yeah, I mean, my main association with him was from White House and consumer electronics,
Okay.
the music side of things.
Yeah, I have to admit, like, I was not too familiar with that shit before I published with them,
Okay.
and while anyway, I don't need to give my opinion. I love Philip anyway.
Okay.
But that Infinity Land book is great, and if anyone happens to pick that up, I recommend it. That actually elevated my opinion of Philip quite highly, or I don't know, elevated. It's just nice to see what he was all about. Okay, I'm going to move on to another question. This is the only kind of heavy question I have for you. So,
Okay. All right.
I said, okay, I want to preface this question with a statement. You're welcome to deflect, and I kind of suspect that you will.
Okay.
I'm still going to ask. So, in most of your interviews that I've read, you talk about your work mostly in regards to what you're doing with language. And while that's all well and good, I sort of don't believe most people come to your books with the initial thought of, like, oh, Dennis writes a beautiful sentence.
All
I
right.
mean, there are very consistent themes that permeate your writing, such as young, emotionally complex boys who are often subject to extreme sexual violence. And I think that's both shocking and exciting for young readers to stumble upon. It certainly was for me in my early 20s. But there's also this essence of love for your late friend George Miles smeared across so much of your work. I'm going to reference one of my experiences in hopes of getting closer to my question. So, when my last novel, The Magician, was published, my girlfriend at that time, who I would later marry, she had a pretty strong reaction because there's a portion of my novel that has a lot to do with my ex-girlfriend who I'd once been deeply in love with. And my girlfriend or fiance or wife, whoever she was to me at that time, in her head, it became clear that I've been waking up most mornings for the past several years to work on a manuscript that had so much to do with this other person I'd had a relationship with. And I was then planning to go out and promote the book, to do interviews where I would discuss all of this publicly for several months or longer. What I mean to say is that the experience was complicated for me because this thing I was proud of that I worked on for many years became this wound for someone else that I profoundly cared for and loved and wanted to spend my life with. And I guess it doesn't matter anymore because she and I are now getting a divorce. But getting back to you, I assume because you're a human being, that you've fallen in love and had romantic relationships beyond George. And I assume some of these people you've had relationships with know what you do, what your work is about. Have you ever felt like this was a barrier, like a wall with someone you were dating or in love with? Or maybe you could speak to that. I mean, the beginning of I Wished, for example, I brought this on my honeymoon and I read that beginning and it was like I just had to put it down for several months. It was just such a, I don't know. And this is like stuff we deal with internally, but I also realize this affects, I mean, maybe it doesn't for you, but for me, this affects my relationships with other people uh, when I write profoundly personal stuff.
Well, I mean, I wish I wasn't in a relationship, so.
Oh,
At
okay.
the not in a relationship. So that doesn't didn't count. Yeah, I mean I mean when I was working on the cycle, I had, boyfriends. Um I don't think anybody really, I mean, I don't think George in particular, because everybody knows that's like it was in the past, and because it's so lofty to me, it's like so big or something. It transcends. It's like, I mean, George and I weren't boyfriends. I mean, we did have a it did become a physical and sexual, but that was at the end of our relationship. But I mean, we went many, 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 many years where that wasn't a thing. So I think everybody understands that it's bigger than that. No, it's more the problem is just the writing is just is the reason why I don't want to have relationships anymore, because I'm just a really hard worker, and I'm really dedicated to what I do, and that's what is the problem, is that I prioritize that. I've always prioritized that, and it's hard to have a relationship when someone is like watching you just sit there and write for a long time and not pay any attention. So I had some that definitely caused problems in a bunch of my relationships, but it wasn't about like what I wrote about. Most of the people I've been involved with don't aren't interested in what I do. They're not interested in my work. It's they just people that I were had their own things and weren't really. That's not why they were with me. Well, a couple of them, but it's really that. It's that I just it's obvious that that's what really matters the most to me is my work, but
Okay.
not really. I don't remember that ever being like, like, why don't you write a book about me like you write about George or anything. I mean, I don't remember anybody ever doing that.
Fair
Yeah,
enough. I,
I dedicate most of the books to my boyfriend at the time, so maybe that helped.
that's kind of sweet. Yeah, I don't know if it's even like, well, in my experience, something that would like no one is asking me to write a book about them. I feel like they all know this would be like sort of fucked or whatever. But but
Yeah.
that makes sense too. And I think it's good, I don't know, to it's probably better to date people who aren't like invested in you as an artist. I feel like that would be kind of
Yeah.
insane. Anyway, um,
Yeah.
so, well, then I guess that didn't really get to any heaviness on my part. So I'm going to keep moving on then. Well, let's talk about your films.
Ah,
Those seem to be where a lot of your focus is these days, right?
yeah, that's what I'm really interested in. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, fuck books. Well, we
No, no, not like that.
so all right. Well, when I met you in Los Angeles, I remember talking to you about like Cattle Towards Glow, which
Right.
was the first film you made with your collaborator Zac Farley, right?
Right. Yes.
Okay. Am I remembering correctly that the vignettes that make up this film were originally supposed to be porn scenes and that you just refused to shoot the hardcore sex?
No, it's not exactly that.
Okay.
Yes, originally the original version of the script, which is different. Um, I had always wanted to make a porn film, like forever, and I've said this so many times, but I thought that like it was a form where you could do some incredible genius, like meta artistic masterpiece, and that why hadn't anyone ever actually done that? It seemed strange to me, and I thought I bet I could do it.
Yeah.
So some guy years ago heard about this and said, I work, he was like connected with Falcon and all these other companies that were big porn companies. He says, I can do it. Write your script, I'll get it made.
Yeah.
So and I said, what are your restrictions on the script? Nothing. Do whatever you want. Okay. So I wrote the script and and I gave it to the guy and he's like, fucking no way I can make this script. Well, I don't know what he thought I was gonna do. I don't know. I mean, but yeah, because it's like in the film, it's still there. The guy hires this hustler who pretends to be dead, and then he's actually dead. And the guy has sex with him, not knowing he's dead. There's a guy who gets raped by an audience while he's giving a performance, and other things. So anyway, so that and then someone came to me and said, I heard about the script and they looked at it and they wanted to produce it. But at that point, I didn't want to make it a porn movie, so it became a thing that's like structured like those porn movies were in the '80s with like 5 different sections, different actors, and that used to be very standard. And it was still always about sex, but taking almost all the sex out of it. That became what was interesting. So there is a little sex in it. I mean, there's rimming and there's cocksucking and things, but it's not quite as yeah. So anyway, yes, it was going to be a porn film, and then it became a kind of film about porn that isn't a porn film.
Well, I'm curious because all right, so like talking to you just right now and in that prior conversation, I'm reminded of so many people I've spoken with because I used to do porn. It was my career for 8 years as a performer, and then probably 5 or so years behind the scenes. And I interviewed Christopher Norris, who you might at least be familiar with, and he worked at kink.com at least for several years, also behind the scenes, but he was talking to me about pornography as if it's like this art form that allows for so much freedom, which is like exactly the opposite of my experience with it because people like often want like yourself or like I feel like I can make like this really cool porn, and then you get with a studio and realize like there are so many restrictions. For example, if you were to do something far less extreme than what you're talking about, like fucking a dead boy or something, but just like put fake blood on someone's face, you can't do that in the United States
Right, right,
legally because it's like the hardcore sex with any mention of violence is like
yeah.
illegal essentially. And I was just like, where does this idea come from? I guess I saw like Cattle Towards Glow initially at this like gay porn theater in Los
Right,
Angeles. I actually
right,
took my wife on one of our first dates together, which was funny. And there's all this porn playing, but they were smart about it that they cut, they let you watch maybe 5 minutes of the sex and then they cut this because this is fucking boring, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I mean, it's not boring when you're jerking off. But
yeah, yeah,
where does this concept come from that everyone like believes there's this freedom involved? I suppose it's because of the sex.
yeah, right.
You don't have an answer.
No, I mean, no, it's not exactly the same answer, but a friend of mine, I should have listened to my friend who he was always telling me, you can't do that. You can't do what you want to do. And his name was Norman Yamamoto, and he was half of Bruce and Norman Yamamoto were big video artists, but
Okay.
in under his in not secretly, but his other thing was that he directed gay porn films, and he directed a lot of the biggest gay porn films of the '80s under the Matt Sterling, which was a very big company in the '80s, and he directed under the name Jason Sato. He directed a bunch of them, and he was always like, "Dude, it's so not what you think." And then I was teaching this writing workshop at my apartment at one point. This is like I don't know, in the early '90s, I guess. And I was bringing in a lot of different guests, and I had him come in. I said, "Why don't you talk about porn?" And so he brought it, and he showed us all these outtakes from these porn films, and he said, "This is what it's like." So you'd see a big porn star. You'd see a scene where he's like rimming another porn star, and then they'd say cut, and they would both go like,
Hi.
oh, that was horrible, and stuff
I
like that.
had
He
an
said, this is
experience like that working
yeah,
actually for men.com right after I quit my performing career.
right.
And it was like I was used to being on a lot of straight sets where, we would shoot like 3 scenes a day or something. And they're like, no, we can only get through one max on these gay sets. And I was sort of like, why? And they're like, we're gonna be here like 13 hours. It's because they contract straight men all the time and they're horrible. They're just, I mean, I don't, they may be beautiful to look at, but they're horrible performers. They don't want to be there. It's just
Yeah,
like a
yeah,
fucking nightmare. Anyway, uh,
yeah,
well, I was going to say, in addition to this question, like one of the things that I love about your work that seems echoed in like Cattle Towards Glow, and even the way you went about making it, meaning not being bothered to shoot the sex. I mean,
yeah,
I know there's a little bit, but that's about all I think all as a
yeah,
traditional film voyeur we can handle without getting bored.
yeah.
Um, so you deal with extremely explicit subject matter around sex or sexual violence, but this often seems a vehicle to access or touch upon our inability to fully express where our mind or body goes during sexual experiences. Maybe I'm wrong in terms of what you're going after, but
That's true.
Okay, so for me, it's like because sex can be profound, right? And yet there's this strong case to be made that we turn literally fucking stupid when we're aroused. So
Right.
I want to read a passage from your short story, Three Boys Who Thought Experimental Fiction Was for Pussies. Look, ugly man. It's a kind of entry point to this discussion. So you're right. I knew Rick's ass from porn films, but several years had passed and it had slightly gone to seed. Still, it was very friendly, or maybe I mean more realistic. Superficially, it hadn't changed much. Still, who knew what was happening inside? I was too afraid to ask. Its appetite for things too large and obviously painful hadn't changed, but what had once seemed impossible wasn't anymore. So when it gobbled up my fist, that didn't make him a magician. He lay down on his stomach. I fisted him, then crawled on top and fucked my brains out. Right before I came, he delivered a line of bad dialogue with such intensity it would have turned one of his porn scenes into comedy. But I came because he meant it. I wish your cock was 8 feet long, I said, or he said. God, I wish that. I feel like that's like a classic. Well, I don't know. In terms of your funnier shit, I feel like that's like a very Dennis Cooper passage. But like what I know you've talked about this a lot before, but there is something really interesting with how you write sex compared to most writers I come across. Um, it's almost never, I mean, the point is never to be arousing or to really express this in terms of like narrative or anything like that, right? What is, I don't know.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's not jack off stuff. It's but I'm very interested in pornography, like super interested in pornography. I've always really I've studied not so much writing pornography written. I think that's really just doesn't work, but visual pornography I'm interested in, and I'm interested in like how, why is it, when and why does it really work? When does it become erotic? And eschewing like, well, I'm really a foot fetishist, so I like it when the foot, I don't mean that. I mean like what is it about the way it's portrayed that makes it become really exciting at certain point? Especially since, I mean, they do this, every porn film is the same basic stuff. So you've seen this thing, you've seen what you're watching happen a million times. It's just a different body
Right.
or different bodies. So anyway, so yeah, basically what I'm trying to say is like I'm interested in how that works, and I try to use that effect. I try to make them erotically charged, or more often seem like they're leading towards an erotic charge, like it's building towards the erotic charge, and then you undercut it, and then it's like, because what I'm really interested in is like the stuff they can't talk about, the stuff they can't feel, because what interests me about the things I read about is because they're like this supercharged version of like very central stuff. I mean,
Right.
feeling, desire, power. These things are what interests me, and this is like this kind of like weird like nucleus of all those things happening at once. So I'm really trying to use it. I'm trying to use that power because I think if you're going to have it sex, you might as well let it have its full power, but then try to intersect it, or kind of make this whole subterranean thing happening. So it's just really trying to get both at the same time. So if so it kind of seems arousing or something, or it's written as though it's arousing. I mean, and first that's like the kind of basic one where it's like this guy's telling you that he's killing these guys and it's pornography, basically.
Right.
It's like that's the lure to get you to believe him because it's all a lie. And there's all these things, completely implausible things happening in that letter of confession, but you believe them because it's written in this erotic charged way. Those are the things that interest
That makes sense. I love
me. Yeah.
that. Anyway, it sounds like I'm probably not alone. Um, well, let's talk about some of your other movies.
Yeah.
I think, all right, so the only other one I've seen is Permanent Green Light,
That's the only
right?
one there is.
Oh,
Only one there is
yeah, I mean, there's
so
one
far.
in the making, I hope.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, which was really interesting for me to see because like Cattle Towards Glow was like this vignette series, and there was a lot of stuff that I think people would recognize from your earlier work, at least your literary work, that was put in this in the way that it could be. I mean, I think some of your stuff is just probably impossible really to adapt in a visual sense without. Um, but there was like, it's still about young boys. It's still about this complexity now around kind of the idea of dying or suicide, but not, right? It's like about disappearing. And I know you've talked about this in reference, like this sort of jihadist who wasn't trying to kill himself for any ideological reason, or I don't know. But
Right.
um, I'm also I was really sort of impressed by the stillness of the film. And, I've read interviews where you reference kind of a lot of the filmmakers that influenced you. And I just have to say, I'm not familiar with fucking any of them. These are sort of like French filmmakers, what from the 70s or something? Who is this person you always bring up?
Bresson.
Bresson. Yeah. I've heard of this. I went to film school. I now can't fucking watch movies anymore because I
I
work
read
on
that.
advertising and
I read
I
that.
just don't do it. Um,
Not even Twisters.
Twisters? I don't know. Like like the sequel to Twister.
Yeah. Yeah.
I watch about 4 films a year, and they're all like massive blockbusters because I'm just curious about like the spectacle of it, and
Sure.
because what I do professionally it has all to do with technical visual effects and stuff.
Sure.
Um, but I did go back and watch Permanent Green Light because I think there's something. I don't know. I still have like a nostalgia for like just things I care about, like in art context, and I read constantly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what but there's almost so it seems like is this movie in your opinion sort of a metaphor for suicide or has nothing to do with that? I mean, I remember just looking at this piece of dialogue, listening to this piece of dialogue. I forget the characters in it, but it's like boy number one. He's talking about this man that he's been researching who disappeared, right?
Yeah.
But he thinks and the other guy is also talking about this in terms of suicide, and he's like, "So do you think he died?" And the boy's like, "No." Is he still out there? No. And it's just like
Yeah. Yeah.
this very complex idea around death, the whole thing. I don't know. Do you want to talk about that at all? This is not really a specific question, but
No, I mean, yeah, I don't think he thinks of it as suicide at all. I think he thinks of it as he wants to do something really huge. Like he's an artist, basically,
yeah,
like a folk artist, and kind of like a magician, like sort of like David Copperfield or something. I mean, he wants to be like that. So he just gets this idea that it's like what would be the most thing that would draw the most attention. Well, if I killed myself, that's like really that would draw a lot of attention. That would give it all this meaning, because there would seem to be so much meaning in that act of using your own life as something, as a spectacle. But at the same time, it wasn't suicide. So that interested him. I think that was really interested him, is that could he pull this off? Could he kill himself? But he wanted to like completely disappear, which that didn't work, because presumably there was gore, which I think
right.
he would have been really disappointed by. But yeah, I think it's just like that. He thought this is like an amazing magic trick that no one's ever attempted, and I want to attempt it, and I want this to be. I mean, he obviously doesn't care if he's alive. I mean,
Yeah,
but I don't think he's at all suicidal. I don't think he even thinks about it that way. Yeah.
fair enough.
Yeah, that's the conceit of the film.
Oh, so formally, like that film feels very minimalist, but in a way that's like it's also super engaging. And I don't know, I have a lot of feelings that has to do with your writing, but is this on purpose? Like when I read your books, obviously, there's so many people being raped, murdered, all of this shit, whether it's real or not. In your films, I feel like we go the opposite route. Do you like shit like gory movies and horror films, or this is
Yeah,
sort of
but it's
yeah,
not my thing. Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in them. I don't go out of my way to see them, but I am interested in how it's portrayed. I usually don't like them. I think the things that I write about, I think the kinds of things that I'm interested in are work in prose, but I think visually they don't really work. I'm not a fan of Solo. I think that Solo is a joke. I don't think it works. When you try to visualize something like that, it becomes silly to me. So no, I'm really interested. I'm interested in super, really austere, kind of pure films. And yeah, we like our films to be like really, really flat. I mean, that not the new one is really different. The room temperature is very different. It's a lot more lively and it has more sort of going on in it. But with Permanent Green Light, I mean, we wanted it to be really flat and really still. And so you had to like you look at their faces all the time, and they say and what they say is important, and you really just have you want people to look in their eyes and try to figure out what they're feeling and stuff. And with no, we don't use music. We try to make it really, really like this really intense, so the viewer has a very intimate relationship with the characters. So we're thinking about things like that. We're not interested in drama or tension or psychological development or any of that stuff. It's like I don't like that kind of stuff.
So what is the when you talk about there's a lot more going on in room temperature, and this is the new movie
Yeah,
that hopefully we'll see at some point.
yeah,
Which
you'll see it soon.
okay, a very close friend of mine helped produce, which I'm excited about.
Yeah,
Her name,
Luca. I mean, he's not only a producer. Luca is the saint of the film. Luca, without Luca, that film would never have gotten made. I mean, there cannot
amazing.
say enough extremely positive and grateful things about Luca. That's for sure.
Well, I hope she listens to this. I'll make sure she does, or I'll
Uh,
at least pass that
yeah,
on. I'm going to see her
yeah,
tonight.
yeah. Well, she knows, but yeah, tell
Yeah, 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 yeah.
her.
So all I
uh,
know about it from her, I mean, I know a little bit more than this, but it's has something to do with haunted houses.
it's a
And
family who lives. They live out in Yucca Valley. You know where that is?
yeah, yeah.
It's yeah. It's so next to Joshua Tree, and they turn their house into a haunted house attraction. They do it every year, and then what's happening during the film is they're turning their house, transforming it into a haunted house attraction, and the family is the runs it, and then they bring a bunch of people and friends and stuff to run it. That's what the basic thing is. I mean, other stuff happens. There's a bunch of other like things that happen during the course of this, but that's what you're seeing is the family builds their haunted house. They have their haunted house. They really want the haunted house, or the dad, it's his project. He really wants the haunted house to be like a great haunted house, and it's very clearly not a great haunted house. And that's kind of the ending is the aftermath of the not so great haunted house. So yeah, it's about a home haunt.
Well, can you give us any more information? Like, because just a moment ago you said, permanent green line is very austere and
Yeah,
we're focusing on everyone's faces, and you said this film has more going on, or I think it's
it's
something.
just more active. It's just like
Okay,
there's much more story. I mean, there's a kind of more narrative in it. I mean, stuff happens. There's like a murder and a ghost. Dead person's ghost appears in the film and stuff becomes part of the film. So there's things like that's much more ambitious, and also just the way the camera moves is much more active.
got
Permanent
it.
Granite's all very still, and we use a different DP for this film, and so there's that, and the performances are more extroverted.
Okay.
So it's not like a lot of flat faces. It there you see a lot. I mean, it's not like they're overacting or anything, but there's definitely a lot more. You see a lot more. They're a little more emotional and a little bit more uh, extroverted.
There's another sort of like literary relationship here involved in your film. I recently learned that the author David Leo Rice's brother was like your assistant director, Rob
Yes,
Rice.
that's it. Yeah, Rob Rice. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
very
he's
cool.
great.
I ran
Yeah,
into him at a coffee shop here in LA like 2 months ago.
he's great. He's amazing. Yeah, yeah, he's amazing.
Very cool.
Yeah,
Well,
everybody we worked with was fantastic. It was that the film, everything around the film has been complete fucking hell. But the film itself and everybody that worked on the film is a joy.
yeah, well, making films is awful in my opinion.
No, the actual shooting and the editing and working with people and casting them, that's really great.
You
It's
love
the
that? You
raising
love,
money. I do. Oh, I totally love it. It was heaven. But raising money, ugh.
yeah,
And then like having to deal with these fucking producers that are just like, ugh. Uh, because we can't, we haven't finished the film because we don't have the funds to finish the film, and it's just all this shit. It's like that kind of stuff is maddening. Yeah.
sure. But you actually like the being on set. I find that,
Love
I mean,
it.
I love the dreaming of it because like everyone, this is not my idea, but it's like, that you make a film in three parts, right? It's like the conceptual and
Right, right,
pre-production, the actual production, which seems the shortest portion of any film, and
right,
then
right.
post. But I find it so stressful to be on set. Especially if I'm
Really?
in charge. Yeah, if I'm in charge, like, because
Well, I'm not.
everything can go wrong. And
Yeah,
it's
but I'm not really. Rob Rice was in charge. I mean,
okay.
Zach did the he was directing the visuals, and I was directing the actors. And no,
Yeah,
I mean, it's amazing. I mean, especially as you write fiction, you write these fictional characters that aren't embodied by anybody and could be anything, and then you have these actual real people there, and you're like constructing these characters in 3D and then collaborating with who these people are. It's amazing. I mean, I was like crying because it's like I wrote this text and they'll deliver this text and I'll be like, oh my God, that is so exactly what I dreamed of. And I get like really teary. Yeah, it's exhausting. I mean, it's like whatever, 12-hour days,
yeah,
especially in the desert is no fun, but no, I loved it. I loved it.
that's good to hear. So, is there any time frame you think we'll be able to see this, or is at this point it's all the fuckery is kind of put that?
There's a lot of fuckery right now. It's been a lot of fuckery for the last few months. We're literally like 5 days away from finishing it. So it's all
Oh
finished.
shit!
Yeah, it's literally 5 days of special effects work, which is very minor. So it's just a matter of getting the funds to do that, and then I mean, this fall something will happen.
All right, wonderful. Well, I can't
Yeah.
wait to see it.
Thanks.
We have like 3 minutes left. I don't know if you
Okay.
want to plug anything or talk about anything
Plus,
specific.
I'm
Like my
not
Ant
a
Sulfate
plugger.
book, which I don't have a contract for, is out now. But you have a new, I mean, you're constantly doing stuff. I find this very impressive.
Oh,
I don't
thanks.
know. I don't know how old you are, but like I hope I'm still
I'm pretty old.
kicking it.
But yeah. Oh, but it's weird. It's just the kind of like physical slowing down thing that's irritating. But otherwise, I can, unless you get like some kind of weird malady or something,
Yeah,
it's really not much different than like you now.
good. That's good to
Yeah,
hear. All
yeah.
right. Well, I don't know what else to say. Thank you for coming on.
Well,
It's
thanks,
a pleasure.
Chris.
This
I'm
went
so
by
happy to
in
talk.
like 2 seconds, I felt like.
It was so nice of you to do this, and it was wonderful to talk to you.
Likewise. Well, should we
We're
just?
gonna come. We're gonna come for Halloween, of
Oh, you
course. The
are.
kids. Yes. Well, we always come to see haunted houses, and hopefully we're gonna finally show the film to the cast and crew, and you can come too, and so but hopefully we'll see you then.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure like Luke and I will be in touch, and it would be
Yeah.
great to all hang out. And I would go to a haunted house. She took me to Knott's last year, which was
Oh, so great.
it's funny. Yeah, I mean,
Genius.
yeah,
Genius.
yeah.
Haunted houses it is.
Okay, we'll do it. All right. Well, have a wonderful day,
You
Dennis.
too. Thanks, Chris. Thanks a lot.
Bye
All
bye.
right. Bye.